Hello and welcome to True Audiophiles. Today I caved in, or this week I should say, and I had reservations about getting what I'm going to talk about today, which is the new Prince and the Revolution Purple Rain one-step. It's done by Because Sound Matters, and it was cut from the digital files, the 24-192 high-res digital file, questioning which digital high-res file that can be talked about in a little bit, but I have my reservations for a couple of reasons. One is I've been kind of weaning myself from some one-steps, you know, the really high-end audiophile ones, which I guess all the one-steps are, mainly because I have not really seen a significant difference in sound quality between them and the lesser priced stuff that's out there. Not that I haven't noticed a difference at all, but there have been instances where I've had the same title done on a non-45 RPM one-step and then the 45 RPM one-step, and I've heard little to no difference, or not enough to justify the cost difference in them. So, and then I had heard that this was cut from a high-res digital file, which the cutting from digital doesn't bother me. It's more of, I have, which isn't available anymore, unfortunately, the high-res, the 24-192 high-res file that was released to HD tracks back in, I want to say 2013. And I made the assumption that it's probably the same transfer, which, you know, there's some news out there that I don't know how legitimate it is or how true it is, that they made a new digital transfer from the original master tape. But even if they did, I'm not really sure why or there would be much of a difference between them, if any, besides them just using different tools or different hardware to do it, and a different person doing the transfer on a tape that is now older. So I'm thinking, my thought was, okay, there's probably not going to be a dramatic difference between the 24-192 high-res files that I own and this one-step that I have that's cut from a 24-192 file. And I should say also that I have, and I'll probably put a link to it in the up in the titles, whichever side it goes on, to show you where my earlier shootout that I did, where I did a shootout between my two Kevin Gray cuts, which I have, which this one is the one done in, I believe it's 2008, which is done from an the original analog master tape. And then I also have this one, which there's some controversy in my mind anyways around it. And this one is done by Kevin Gray as well. My understanding is cut from an analog master tape as well. I've heard that it was cut from a high-res digital file. Regardless, again, I don't care. The mastering is going to make the most difference in my mind and to my ears, in my opinion. But either way, this one is also cut by Kevin Gray a few years later. I think probably more like, let's see, you know, 6, 7 years, no, 8 or 9 years later. So this was for the reissue that was done, that they did a digital version that was mastered, or which was supervised by Prince right before he died, and that digital master is super compressed and just does not sound anywhere near as good as the original. And you can kind of check out my video about what my take is on this version of this compared to the other Kevin Gray cut, although you'll probably find out a little bit more when I go into my discussions here anyways. So anyway, that I also had an original, as you can see here. I also have an original that is a purple vinyl as well. But anyways, the purple vinyl and this one are identical in terms of the cut. They're just, the purple one's actually a little noisier. But anyways, same mastering. So anyway, I decided I broke down, I've listened to a bunch of different reviews, and they seem to be kind of all over the board in terms of, people loving them, people not liking them, people, preferring this one, preferring that one. I had a case of fear of missing out, FOMO, so I decided, okay, I'm going to cash in and I'm going to buy one. So I did buy one. I got it in the mail just a few days ago, and I decided to do this shootout now. So to give you a little bit of history on how I do shootouts, I take all of the different variations. I listen to the album to determine what song or songs are going to make the most sense in determining which track is going to give me the best ability to hear the differences between the different versions of the album. And in this case, I decided on Take Me With You because in the beginning, as an example, there's a drum roll, and the drums are placed all along in the toms and the snares and all that are all placed in different spots along the sound stage. And the sound stage, there's also a lot of stuff going way off to the side, either side of the sound stage, and there seems to be good left to right separation between the different elements of the recording. So I thought it was probably one of the best tracks to compare with. So I do that, then I level match all the different versions I have to make sure that they're going to play back at pretty close to the same volume. For those super nerdy people out there, I try to keep it within about a half a dB of one another, so there's virtually no difference in sound level that is distinguishable anyways. And then I do the sound comparison. In this case, so I'll talk about the one step. I listened to it probably a couple days before I did the actual A-B comparisons here. So when I did listen to it, I actually thought it sounded really good. I was pretty surprised. It had a nice warm feel to it. It definitely didn't seem like it had the brightness of the earlier pressings and masterings of the recording. And overall, I was pretty pleased with how it sounded. And so I was very, very interested to see what my take would be, because I thought the Kevin Gray ones sounded really, really, really good. But I noticed a good clarity in differentiating between all the different elements in the recording, whether it's the snare, the toms, the finger cymbals, the vocals, so on and so forth, and the tambourine. All that kind of stuff really stood out, where I could really differentiate between them really well on the one step. So, and the soundstage was pretty wide and pretty deep too. So next on the agenda was after doing all of the sound adjustments and making sure I had everything at the right volume levels, I then compared the first Kevin Gray cut, which is from Analog. We'll see. I don't know if both are or both aren't, but that's for a discussion for another day. Maybe someone in the know has a little bit more knowledge as to what that's all about. But anyways, I played that first Kevin Gray cut. Definitely sounded very, very good. Good sound quality. What the things that struck out to, or not struck out, but stuck out to me that were definitely different than the one step were there was definitely a little bit more mid-bass in the one step version, and also on the Kevin Gray cut there seemed to be a little bit more of the mid-rangey, higher mid-range, or lower mid-range, or lower treble, higher mid-range tones in it, which kind of adds to kind of a little bit of the harshness that I kind of felt that all the versions of Purple Rain kind of sort of had. Maybe kind of that's an element of it being an 80s recording, I wasn't sure, or maybe even 80s mastering, but whatever it might be, that's the one thing that kind of stuck out to me on the Kevin Gray, and that's definitely true here. I definitely felt that the Kevin Gray had a little bit more of that higher mid-range, lower treble sound tone to it, and less of a kind of a mid-bass sound on it compared to the one step. I would say if I had to make a judgment, that maybe the Kevin Gray is a little bit more neutral, but if it is, it's not by much. Where the one step definitely had a little bit of a boost in the mid bass, and maybe a little tiny bit of a cut in that mid treble ish range, but maybe that's for the better in this case, because I thought that the original had maybe a little bit too much of that. So the other thing that really stuck out though to me was, and it's not super noticeable, but when you do the back and forth, it's something you definitely can hear. The soundstage was a little tiny bit wider on the one step, and also a little tiny bit deeper. I would say that, you know, the biggest difference that I noticed in the depth of the soundstage was actually it was a little bit more forward, but it still went back as far, if that makes sense. You know, where, you know, the what sounded to be the furthest away from you was the same between the two, but what was closer to me sounded closer on this one step than it did on the Kevin Gray. So that was one thing that stuck out, along with a slight bit wider soundstage. So overall, I have to say that I do have a slight preference to the one step. I wouldn't say it's dramatically better, and you know, if you're not wanting to spend $100 on a one step, the, you know, $25 or $30 or whatever the newest version that's out there is available is going to sound really good anyways. It's going to be either cut from, probably, in my opinion, probably the same digital high resolution master or the original analog master, whichever. Again, I'm not someone who is a big proponent of either one of them. I want whatever sounds best, and if the digital master will give it the best sound, then that's fine. So anyway, I say that the one step is definitely going to have a slight bit of an edge. So the next thing I did is I do have, as I mentioned, the 2492 high resolution digital files that were released on HD tracks back in about 2013. So I actually did a 24192 needle drop. I recorded my one step and decided to do an A/B comparison between the two of those files. So between the 24192 copy of my one step and the 24192 HD tracks 2013 release. And what I found was they were very close in sound. I would say the sound stage was nearly identical in almost every way. I would say similar differences, though, between the Kevin Gray cut from an EQ perspective, for the Kevin Gray cut and the one step, where the one step probably had a little bit more of a kind of a mid-bass sound to it, and the HD tracks version had a little bit more of the upper mids, lower treble to it. But overall, they were nearly identical when it came to soundstage, and it wasn't that big of a difference between the EQ, but it was a noticeable difference. So, you know, it leads me to believe that they're probably from the same, maybe digital file, the one step and this HD tracks, and they just made a few EQ changes to it, but obviously that's always hard to tell for sure, and I would love to know if there's anyone in the know that is truly knowing whether they used the same digital file as the HD tracks release they did back in 2013. But anyways, the one step comes the closest to that digital file, and I think before I got the one step, that probably sounded the best, in my opinion, from a soundstage perspective. And between that and the Kevin Gray, though, sounds amazing, and it's definitely right up there. Either one of them, quite honestly, either one of them are right up there as a great sounding vinyl version of it. Definitely better than the earlier copies, in my opinion, anyways. So, and on my system. So anyway, that's kind of my take. I would love to hear your take on it, see what you think. Do you have a bunch of different versions of it? I'd love to hear your take on if you have a version that you have that actually sounds better than any of the ones I've been talking about here. You know, whether it be the HD tracks 24192 high res version, this new one step, either the Kevin Grays, the originals, maybe there's a Japanese pressing that you like better. I'd really love to hear what you have to say about it and get your take on it. But you know, the one step definitely is the cleanest sounding and from a surface noise perspective, although the two Kevin Grays are very quiet. Definitely had the best sound stage of all of them. EQ, I guess you can argue, but I definitely felt that the one step had not only a little bit more mid bass, but just a little bit deeper bass, maybe slightly, but just overall more bass, and it definitely had less of that harshness, if you will, to the Kevin Gray. But I have to say, and I have to be honest, that Kevin Gray did not really exhibit a whole lot of harshness. It's just, especially in comparison to the original, that I remember having a lot more harshness than the Kevin Gray. So, but all just a matter of opinion, but I really love to hear your take and what your thoughts are. I know what some of your thoughts are if you're watching this. Some of the other YouTubers out there, I've heard some of your comparisons and what your thoughts are. And my take is the one step definitely is at least a little bit better. I don't think it's dramatically better or a whole bunch different. I've heard some people say that, you know, the comparison between this one step and the others is very comparable to like the Michael Jackson Thriller one step to the other earlier pressings of Thriller, but I don't think it's as dramatic, anywhere near as dramatic as the Thriller one, MoFi is in comparison to the earlier pressings of Thriller. So anyway, love to hear your take, but that's everything I have for this episode. If you liked what you saw here, hit that like button. If you subscribe, thank you. If you don't, please do so. And I want you to have yourself a good rest of the day and a great rest of the week. Thanks a lot, everybody.